Jonathan Akwue. Welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
I am doing well. Thank you very much. Really pleased to be here.
Freaking pumped to have you. We're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about translation. You're the president of translation.
That is correct.
Best advice for the next generation, what's going on with United Masters, what's going on in sports and culture. How does that run a show sound?
Sounds perfect. Let's go for it.
Okay, but before we begin, I have a very important question for you. I did some homework.
Oh, God.
And I know that you in a past life, or maybe in this current life still, you DJ'd. Is this correct?
This is true, yes.
Okay. And you're a fan of hip-hop. Is this correct?
I am indeed, yeah.
Okay. Here is the question to start off the interview. Ross is paying attention very closely in our audience here. Your Mount Rushmore of hip-hop artists.
Okay.
That's only 4. Best of all time. Who are you putting on? And your one spot does matter. 1, 2, 3, and 4 do matter.
Oh, okay. That's a tough question. And how many spots do I get?
4.
4. All right. So I've got to put. Can I start from the top, or do you want to go in reverse order? Actually, let me save
Get your top. 4 up there, and you can rearrange it for sure.
Okay. Greatest of all time. My goodness me. So I'm old school. So for me, Public Enemy has got to go on there. There's so many. Jay-Z.
It's a good pick.
I'm trying to think of some. I don't want to be all in the same era, but like these are some of the biggest names.
It's not an easy podcast.
Kendrick would have to be there. And I think my number 1 would have to be Rakim, as in Eric B. and Rakim. Has to be.
I love it. So you got Public Enemy, you got Kendrick, you got Jay-Z, and Rakim.
Yeah, those would be the top 4.
Ross, can we get a scale of 1 to 10 on how that was?
It's a 9. The Rakim poll's nice.
Okay.
He gave it a 9. Rakim polls nice, he said.
Appreciate
Public
you.
Enemy, Jay-Z, some good old school picks.
Yeah, 100%.
Some good old school picks, Ross said, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of tells you the era that I'm in. I thought you was going to bring out one of my DJ stories, one of my after party stories. I don't know if you heard this one.
No, you got one? You want to share it?
Yeah, so I don't like to brag, but I did teach Prince Charles, now King Charles, how to DJ. So, and I have the proof. So if you want to put it in post, you can, but I've got the photo to prove it.
Okay.
But yeah.
You want to give some context on how that all worked out?
So one of my first jobs, I was actually paid to teach kids how to DJ. So I would work in these kind of community centers. This is in London. You may have guessed from the accent.
Yep.
And and this was funded by one of the Prince's charities. And so there was an event coming, and they were like, he was going around, and they said, hey, do you want to show him what you do? And so they said, the Prince might want to have a go. Would that be okay? So I was like, yeah, sure. So he comes along, and I was like, and in fact, I asked him, I said, do you want to have you want to learn how to do it? Because I'm doing like, scratching and all that kind of stuff. And so he was like, sure. He was game. So I showed him, get him on the decks, and he was terrible.
Of course.
I'm not gonna lie. He was just like, awa, awa. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. But he was very, and then the thing that made me laugh is that he was like, so what sort of music is this? Is this like Bob Marley? And I was like, no, that's reggae. And so he was like, it was like, oh, right. Oh, I'm sure my boys are into this, And I was like, have you heard of Public Enemy? Have you heard of I was just trying to find a reference point. He was like, oh, I'm sure my sons know. But anyway, it was a moment. It was a thing. Got captured in the press. I've been dining out on that story for a very long time.
That's a great one. That's like the fun fact if you're meeting new clients.
That's the one.
You gotta get that one out there. But all this kind of wraps together. The hip hop, you DJing, like help me connect the dots for the listeners. You'll do a better job than I do. Why are we talking about hip hop, DJing, translation? How does this all kind of fit together in the same ecosystem?
Well, so I guess it goes back to, if you think about translation, and obviously founded by Steve Stout, comes from the world of hip hop. So Steve is like one of the legends in the industry. He's the guy who went out and found Nas and signed Nas. So in terms of, he's worked with all the greats. Was Mary J. Blige's manager. He's a legend in the hip hop industry, and his inspiration for translation actually came from. So he was a music executive. He was doing well, making money, heading up black music, and at one of the majors, and was working with Will Smith. You remember the film Men in Black?
Of course.
And so he was working on the soundtrack for that with Will Smith. And as you may recall, famously, Will Smith wore those black Ray-Bans. And Steve recognized at the time when the album came out, they sold like 10 million, whatever, went platinum, did great. You know, it was the CD, did fantastic. But the glasses that Will Smith was wearing sold like 10x that. And suddenly Ray-Ban went from nowhere into like the must-have item. And so that was the aha moment for Steve, where he was like, wait a minute. Culture, this culture, hip-hop culture, these individuals, because obviously Will Smith started as a rapper, then became an actor, can sell more than music, can sell products. And then link that back to, you think about like the birth of like the early days of hip hop. So you think about someone like Run DMC, and you may have heard the story about when Run DMC got their Adidas deal. It was the first major brand deal for a rapper or for a rap group. And what happened was those guys, Adidas were nowhere in the US. Adidas, as Americans say, just to translate.
I got I'm tracking.
Yeah, but they were nowhere. Their market share was nowhere. Obviously, the kids like Run DMC used to wear the Adidas. They used to have the kind of, and there was the famous song by Run DMC, My Adidas. And so they had a massive concert. I think it was 1984, maybe 1986, in Madison Square Garden. And the marketing one of the marketing managers for Adidas went to Germany, told the marketing team, you've got to come and see what's going on in New York. Flew them out to Madison Square Garden. There's one point where in the middle of the song, when they're just about to do My Adidas, Run says, everybody just take off your sneaker and rock it in the air. And you've got all these kids holding up their Adidas sneakers and they're just rocking out to My Adidas. And they literally signed, I think it was $1 million deal, brand deal, at the back of Madison Square Garden, off the back of just seeing that. So those were the kind of formative moments that informed the birth of translation, which was that there is a linear line between what happens in culture and how you can then translate that into brand equity and commerce.
And you know, I think it's easier for us to wrap our heads around it today in 2026. As when this goes live, it'll be 2026.
Yeah.
However, in the early 2010s, like these agencies didn't have as much understanding to the industry.
Correct.
I recall doing some research. Didn't you pitch your network agency that you were working at once you read a book from Steve Stout to create your own agency, multicultural agency, I guess is like what they were calling it back then, within a larger agency network, and it got denied? Is this correct?
That's right. It wasn't actually my agency, but I'm friends with Rory Sutherland. I don't know if you know Rory. So it's like
Ogilvy.
Yep. And we knew each other back then. I was in London, and again, I read Steve's book, The Tanning of America, where he kind of laid out this whole thesis, and I just read it, and I was like, that's what brought Steve to my attention. That's what brought translation to my attention. And I was like, he gets it, because he's kind of pushing against this kind of multicultural marketing versus general market and this idea of old school segmentation. So I then take that book to Rory, and I'm like, oh my God, Rory, you got to read this book. And I was like, we got to, let's do this thing. Now, there was already an Ogilvy culture in the US set up as a kind of multicultural shop. But I said to Rory, why don't we take the principles of what like Steve's talking about in this book and do something with launch Ogilvy culture, but make it much more diverse and UK and, all the flavors and basically the ethos of what translation is today. Rory was down for it. We went and pitched it to the then CEO of, I remember we went for a lunch with the then CEO of Ogilvy, who listened and just went, "No, we're not doing that."
Why do you think?
So to be fair to him, he was basically saying that Ogilvy had got to that point where they had in his words, they'd let 1,000 flowers bloom. And so there was all these little initiatives all over the shop. And what he was trying to do was consolidate Ogilvy. So he said, look, I get it. I understand what you're talking about. He was like, but I'm in a place now where I need to consolidate. We need to kind of streamline what Ogilvy is. So it wasn't the right time for him.
Okay.
And that's
fair.
just how it worked out.
I mean, and that's fair. Like there's larger business things that play sometimes, but like you didn't give up. Like
No.
you kept going at it. I mean, fast forward to today, you're at that shop now that's leading the way.
It's a crazy story how I ended up there. So as I say, this is 2012. So Steve's on my radar. I remember Googling at the time and thinking, is there a translation in London? And I was like, there was not. So I was like,
I want everybody to pay attention to this story. If you're telling how you met Steve's story.
this is how I met Steve.
Okay,
Story.
everybody listen in. I'm talking to our live audience here as well as our virtual.
And this you're gonna have to put this down as like one of those random occurrences. So, as I say, I'm interested in what Steve's doing. I'm interested in translation. I'm keeping an eye on it, but I'm in London. There is no translation in London. I end up joining Publicis Group, having a great time in Publicis, moving around the world, London, Singapore, and then eventually in New York. Get to New York, and I get an invite because I'm on the media side of the business at this time, and I'm working with Bank of America. I get an invitation to the Masters. I'm not going to lie, I'm not a huge golfing fan. I do not know a great deal about golf. Love, great game, just don't know a lot about it. But everyone's telling me you've got to go to the Masters, right? If you get an opportunity, you've got to do it. Opportunity of a lifetime. And there's a guy in my team who's like, John, you don't just go to the Masters, you've got to get the merch from the Masters. I had no idea that merch from the Masters is a thing.
Because you can't get it anywhere else.
Correct, right? And then because I had like this VIP pass, there's a separate shop where you get the merch from, like you get it from Berkman's, which is like separate to the main merch in the Masters. So he was like, you've got to go to the exclusive. This for me was like, it's kind of like Supreme, but for old white people. It's just
oh, for sure.
It's crazy. And so everybody, because when you go to the main store, people are stripping the shelves. It's just like, wow.
I think that's like how they make a lot of their money.
Yeah.
Because they sell the sandwiches and stuff for fairly cheap.
That's right.
It's like from the merch.
Correct.
But also, real quick note here, this is why you want to work on the media, like with media vendors, because they'll take you to nice things. And
there is a world of difference between being on the media side to being on the creative side. We can have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
But you can put it down to who's paying for the check. And so, so I get this opportunity. I'm standing there in the store. I'm looking to buy some stuff because I was like, got to come back with something. I look to my left, I see this black dude. I've got to be real, there's not that many black people at the Masters, especially in the VIP section that I happen to be in. And it was Steve Stout. So I thought, wait a minute. So I just went and introduced myself, and I was like, Steve? And he was like, have we met? And I was like, we haven't met, but you've had an influence on my career. So he was like, well, how so? And I said, well, for one thing, I read your book. He was like, you read my book? I was like, yeah. I was like, what was that, 2014? He was like, that was 2012. So I was like, well, it had a big impact on me, and I informed. And so we start getting into this conversation. So he was like, so what are you doing now? I said, well, I'm a publicist. I've been there for 9 years. And I was like, I've actually worked with Samsung for 10 years. Oh. And then he said, you worked with Samsung for 10 years? You must be a crazy mother, fill in the blank.
Yeah, it's a machine. It's a machine over there.
Right. And so he says, because I know those Koreans. And he was like, there's some crazy mother, fill in the blank. And so I was like, I guess I am. And so he was like, so he said, but then I was, obviously working with Bank of America. And then he was like, so what brings you to New York? And he asked me, how do you find living in New York? And I said to him, this is true. Like as a kid growing up in South London, everything I loved in life was coming from New York. I had two loves. One was hip hop and the other one was superhero comics, specifically Marvel superhero comics. I was an illustrator, so I started my career. And both of those were coming from New York. So when I moved to New York, one of the first things I did was drive down with my kids at night to the Bronx, to 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. And I'm standing outside, which is in the projects. And I'm standing outside 1520 Sedgwick Avenue and I'm going, this is it, kids. Here, August the 11th, 1973, this is where hip hop started. DJ Kool Herc had a party right here. It is the birth of hip hop. Meanwhile, my kids are saying, Dad, get back in the car. We're in the projects. Like, what are you doing? This is crazy. And I was like, if I'm telling Steve the story, and I'm like, if I could have, I would have walked around 7 times. I would have done like the Hajj, because it was Mecca for me. It was like, this is it. This is the birthplace of so much that, hip hop had such a massive impact on my life. So I'm telling Steve this story, and he's like, brother, we should do lunch. And so he was like, let me get your number. Let's do lunch. So I was like, cool. So, we exchanged numbers. Had to write it down on a piece of paper because they take your phones off you at the Masters. So I didn't have a phone. So I have to write it down with a golf pencil. And I walk away. I'm like, hey, I just met Steve Stout. I was like, that's pretty cool. That was
you hit it off. But
and we hit it off. So then a few weeks, scroll forward a few weeks, I start getting text messages from him. We're trying to find a time to do lunch. Either he can't do it, I can't do it. We're playing this kind of ping pong, trying to find a time we can do. Then he sends me a text one day. And he says, John, can I call you in 5 minutes? I said, sure. Pick up the phone, and he says, I'm going to cut straight to the chase. I've spent a year looking for a president for my agency. I've got a headhunter in my office right now trying to get me to sign off on another candidate. I don't think they're the person. I think you're the guy.
Incredible. From that one conversation.
10 minutes in a golf store in, just a random conversation, and he offers me the job.
In Augusta, Georgia.
In Augusta, Georgia. That's correct.
Incredible.
That's correct.
Incredible. Yeah. And you think, why? Is it the instant connection? What was going on in Steve's brain to hire you? The love for hip hop, the love for culture, the fact that you've been in the behemoth of the Publicis group working on Samsung.
Yeah.
Like all this kind of these notes he's taking in his mind, is that what led him to believe you would be the right person?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I asked him that question because I was like, Steve, that's so random. And by the way, I didn't say yes automatically because, I was at Publicis, and if you've noticed, Publicis were doing quite well. Mm-hmm. And they would,
sure.
I had a great run there. They were great to me and my family. So I didn't immediately say yes. It took me a minute to go and also, and we'll talk about United Masters, because that was actually a big reason why, part of the reason why I said yes was actually related to United Masters as much as it was for translation. But I asked Steve that question, and I was like, what was it about that conversation that made you come to that conclusion? And he said to me that he had seen a lot of people that had been interested in the role because they could see the value of what he's trying to do and what Translation and United Masters are doing. They could see that, so they're looking at it and they can see that it's valuable. And he goes, but it wasn't valuable to them. And he said, when he had a conversation with me, he said, you could see the value of it, but also that it's valuable to you. And he goes, that's what I was looking for. Incredible. Someone for whom this is personal. And it is.
Yeah.
For me, this is personal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like when we're hiring, we are on Madison Avenue. This is like the mecca of old advertising.
Correct.
Which is like a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at like Ross or Ellie or whoever we hire next, it's like, do you love advertising?
Yeah.
Can I talk to you about some of the old ads and the old people? Yeah. What's going on in the industry today? Who's your favorite agency? We are going to be in a room together for hours every single day.
I love it.
For the rest of eternity talking about advertising, so you better love it.
Correct.
So I'm assuming that's what's true here is that he found that with you, with hip hop, with culture, what he's building here. So I think it's absolutely makes a lot of sense, and it was a great hire. And you started as the president when?
That would have been November of 24. So it's just over a year ago.
Incredible.
Over a year ago. Yeah.
Incredible. So we'll get into that. I need to understand, we need to, for our audience to understand, what is United Masters, what is translation, how are they fitting like together here? Because it's really incredible stuff. Like you can tap into United Masters for that data to get into these briefs and like actually create good creative. Can you give us a rundown, just 10,000 foot ladder of what this all looks like?
Yeah, and you've nailed it, because translation is a culture agency. We called ourselves a culture agency before everybody else did, to be fair. Now you walk 50 yards in New York, everybody's a culture agency.
Yeah.
But the secret, or everyone says we don't make ads, we make culture and all that kind of stuff. That's the kind of language that you hear people using. But if you talk to strategists and you scratch underneath the surface, when you actually say to people, well, where do you get those insights from? When you say, oh, we're plugged into culture, where do you get those insights from? Everybody's drinking from the same pool. It's GWI, it's Nielsen, it's Pace Panels, it's Experian, it's Contagious, it's Walk. It's like, so they're dipping into the same well of culture. And so what makes translation different is the fact that when Steve told me about United Masters, I was like, wait a minute, explain more about that. Because United Masters is essentially a music distribution platform. It's a record label. It's a music distribution platform. It lives in your pocket. The insight behind it was, again, Steve, seeing around corners, was like, in the traditional music industry, when you are an artist, you have to sign away your masters. You have to sign away your IP to the major labels. And they own that. And they own that I can't even say the word. Forever is the word. I was going to say in perpetuity, but it's not that. Gotcha. But they own it forever, right? Yeah. So you don't own the rights. And Steve saw that actually the future of music is going to be independent, where artists will increasingly, because you used to have a major label to get your music out there. Now you just have to have access to the distribution platforms, to Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music, et cetera, et cetera. So he built a distribution platform, which is what United Masters is. And when he starts having a conversation with me, he was like, well, we've got 2.5 million artists on the platform. Now it's actually closer to 3 million artists on the platform. We're distributing, like, it's the numbers, like 50 billion streams, audience of 3 billion people listening to the music that gets produced by the artists on United Masters. And we got some big, artists like Big X The Plug and Brent Faiyaz, etc. Some
freaking love it.
Mainstream, some big name artists.
I have a question.
Go.
use is a distribution platform. Like I mean, I'm using Spotify for creators for this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and I put it into Spotify for creators, and then it puts it on Apple Podcasts. It puts it on, it puts it on Spotify, Apple, and like Amazon Music and all these other platforms that
Yes.
stream it to the public facing part.
Yes.
That's like how people are finding this right now. And I upload it to YouTube on the side here.
Yeah.
So is this what United Masters is? Is it then distributing it to
Correct.
these different platforms?
Correct.
Just
Yep.
for the artists. Got it.
Correct, exactly for that. So if you're an artist and you want to get your music out to all the platforms, then you go, so DSP, it's called a DSP, which is different to a DSP in the media world.
Yeah.
But it's the same principle, which is a distribution platform that then sends it to all the streamers and sends it to all the music platforms. So
And that
that's
gives it analytics to them.
Correct.
Like so
Correct.
if I'm
So
an
see your
artist, then I'm
audience.
going to see my
Correct.
audience. I'm going to see the streams where they're located.
Exactly.
These, you know, the demographics of like these people.
who's listening, where it's been
But
playing.
you guys have all of that data.
Correct. And so what they did, and so what he built was a platform. So it's basically a record label in your pocket. So they built the app. It's a technology platform that sits there, gives the artists all that insight into who's listening to their music, where are they listening to it, and actually supports them on their journey as entrepreneurs. And that was the light bulb moment for me, because again, I've been in the media side of the business for a few years. And then I was like, oh, hold on a minute. This isn't 2.5 million consumers. This is 2.5 million creators.
Yeah.
These are influencers, creators, you know, entrepreneurs. So I'm like, that is a massive pool of insight. That is an interesting or a massive pool of culture. And so that was the bit for me where I was like, wait a minute. So I'm talking to Steve and I'm like, what are you doing with that? Like, how can we interpret that? And how is that used at translation? He's like, we're using it, but we're not doing as much as we could. And that's because we haven't got someone like you. Because by the way, he's very good at selling.
Yeah, you're selling me here. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, let's go. Let's figure
Right?
this out.
So that was the thing for me, which is like, you know, when we talk at translation about United Masters being our secret sauce, and I was like, no, we need to change that to our signature sauce, because it is the way in which we can plug into culture. And I can go into how I think culture is moving and changing, and the changes that we see here in the US, but how that's been impacted globally. Because what it gives us the possibility to do is to see, and my belief is music is at the sharp end of culture. And there's a reason for that, because now it's so easy to create music. It's not like, you know, now you need to have, you know, a record label, major label. Now you can make music at home and you can sign up to United Masters or another distribution platform and you can get that music to an audience. And we've seen that happen. People that have gone from nowhere to like literally rocket superstar status with no support. I can tell you the story about that in a second. But what that means is, because music is so easy to create, you can now see the trends and the flows of where people are starting to grab to it and where people are gravitating towards that music. And so, again, there was a stat that I came across which kind of blew my mind when I came, and I literally had to double check it. I remember talking to the CMO of McDonald's, and she was like, "Are you sure that's right?" And I was like, "This is correct, right?" So I've built it up now. Maybe it's not that big a deal, but it was to me. If you think about it, or if you look into it, 90% of the world's population today, under the age of 25, lives in the global south, right? So that means they live in South America, Africa, large parts of Asia. So you flip that stat the other way around. That means only 10% of the youth population of the world lives in North America or Europe.
Oh, wow.
Only 10%.
No, that is wild.
90%,
Yeah.
right? So that is where, so my thing is like, okay, who makes culture? Like typically it's young people, because they're pushing against what came before, right? They're always, you know, there's always this reaction against what happens before. So you then go, oh, and then you look at, okay, what are the fastest growing musical genres in North America over the last 10 years? K-pop, Afrobeat, Latin music. Where are they coming from? Latin America, Africa, Asia, where all the young people are, right? So again, I'm a kid in South London. I was influenced by North American culture, right? Because America's been in the cultural export business for years. That's why a kid like me, you know, everything from Hollywood to hip hop is getting exported from the US.
Yeah.
That's why a kid like me, you know, living in South London, I'm loving, you know, all this stuff. But now the US is in a culture import export business.
Yeah.
And look at Coachella. Look at 30,000 people singing along to Bad Bunny.
Yeah, Super Bowl.
Right? Look at Super Bowl.
Yeah.
they don't speak Spanish, but they're still singing every word, right? So you'll see, look at K-pop Demon Hunters. Most viewed content on Netflix, bar none, everything. And then look at the most viewed content in terms of serialized content, it's Squid Games, both coming out of Korea. So the world is completely flipped. And here was my conversation that I had with Steve, coming from a holdco, right? I know, I'm in Publicis. Publicis spent 1.4 billion buying Epsilon, right? Because that gives them customer records for 220 million Americans. And so every time you go into a Starbucks, or every time you put your, when they say, oh, do you want to put your loyalty number in there, and you put your telephone number when you buy in the store, the back end to that is Epsilon. So they know your data. They know where you shop, what you're buying, when your credit card's going to expire, all this kind of stuff. Very valuable data. There's a reason why Publicis is winning everything. That's because they've managed to join the dots in terms of consumer profiles. My conversation with Steve was like, if you're trying to out holdco the holdcos, you won't win, because they are chasing customers. They're chasing consumers. But nobody is really in the business of chasing culture, because if you start looking at culture, that's where, because again, you break it down, this 90% of the young people that live in the world, most brands are not interested in those people because they don't have enough money to buy the products that, brands, you think about P&G, think about Unilever, think about all the brands, they want to sell to middle-class consumers. So you have to have enough middle-class consumers to be valuable to those brands. I mean, obviously they're still chasing them, but they're not of the same value as this kind of high demographic of, middle-class consumers. But if that's where culture is being made, then that audience becomes incredibly valuable, because that's where culture, that's the birthplace of where new movements are starting to happen. So I'm having this conversation with Steve. We're going back and forth about this, and he was like, "Brother, I'm already there." He was like, "United Masters, we're in Brazil, we're in Lagos, we're in Mexico City, and we're in London. We're plugged in." So he's going, "I'm there already. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm there." And so that's what again, the light bulb moment for me was, you've got United Masters plugging into the centers of cultural capital around the world, like Brazil, Lagos, London, New York, LA. And then you've got translation plugging into the financial and cultural centers of the world, because we plug into places like New York and LA, but now Dubai, which is where we've started to where we planted our flag, because we're looking at, so as I look at the world, I'm like, there's this global flow of culture, which many of the holdcos are not paying attention to because the consumers are not valuable enough yet. But this is where culture is being made increasingly. And for me, the game is like, how can we start to translate that into value for the brands that we work with? So that's the play.
No, it's incredible stuff. And so it's like getting translations, the financial and the cultural, hitting all those tent poles, all those hot spots to create great work here. So what have you done in the past year, I think, that exemplifies that combination of the financial centers, cultural centers, hitting it all in one spot, campaign stuff that you guys have done since you started?
I mean, okay, so in a weird kind of there's this circularity to the universe. So we now work with Meta, and we work with the wearables division. And so Meta Ray-Ban was one of the things that we started working with. And I say this circularity because Steve's career started with working with seeing the insight around Ray-Ban.
Yep.
And then it just comes around, and then Meta start launching these glasses, and they turn to us to help to launch the glasses. And so one of the things that we did, and we've been working with Oakley Meta and with Meta Ray-Ban as well. But one of the first things that we did was to kind of, because they were smart enough to know, do you remember when Google Glasses came out?
Mm-hmm.
And
it didn't really work.
Did not work because everyone thought you're just a geek, and it wasn't cool, and people felt it was a bit creepy having a camera on your face.
Yeah.
So I think Meta recognized that you've got to land this in culture. You've got to be able to make it, authentic. So one of the first things we did, we organized a hands-free concert, because if you look at Busta Rhymes, there's a famous track, "Put Your Hands Where I Can See Them," and then we looked, and the insight was, a lot of artists, a lot of musicians now playing today, they hate the fact that people are not experiencing the concert because they're on their phones.
Right.
And so
blocking somebody else behind you.
You're blocking that. You're not experiencing it. You're looking at the screen. You're just thinking about capturing, you're out of the moment. So that was our insight in terms of how we took that to Meta. And we were like, hey, a number of musicians don't like phones at concerts. You got comedians like Dave Chappelle that get people to put their phones away before they will do these events because they don't want that interruption. Whereas if you're wearing the technology on your face, you can be much more immersive and experience it. So that was one of the first things that we did for them, was actually get Busta Rhymes. And we did this concert where everybody had to check in their phones, and then you experienced it through the glasses. And what you're doing is you're landing it in culture in an authentic way with an artist who gets it.
Love it.
That was the beginning of our relationship with them.
If you think about the Google Glass, it was just weird. Like it didn't land in culture.
Correct.
And it wasn't cool. And now the Meta Ray-Bans are cool. Like they're more. There's no backlash. It seems like I want a pair. We want a pair.
Exactly.
Like we as content creators, we need to get them. Like nobody's speaking weird about it or anything bad about it. So
which
it's probably
is kind of extraordinary when you think about it. Especially like it's a new form of technology, and already, exactly to your point, it's become like nobody freaks out when you see someone wearing the glasses. In fact, quite the reverse. People are
fun.
like, "It's
It's
cool.
cool. I want to check that out." Like,
Exactly. And then we worked. Now we work with Oakley and Meta, and we've launched this platform called Athletic Intelligence. So here, looking at people that are actually interested in sports and interested in, and how can the glasses actually help you to improve your performance?
Oh, I got to get those.
Right. And that's the thing. So it's like, work with Kylian Mbappe, and we did the whole thing. And so they've really got that culture is the way they're going to win this. And so, again, for us, that's a fantastic opportunity to kind of bring all those things together.
It's almost like it's like perfect for like those new products, like tapping you guys just to make sure that it hits well.
Yes.
And like it doesn't get any backlash on
Exactly.
it.
I mean, we talk about helping brands know what's now, what's next, and what's not for long. And that's what.
Oh, I like that last one.
Yeah.
Not for long.
Exactly, because everyone wants to plug into, okay, what's happening now? But then you've got to know it's so much noise. There's so much noise. What's the signal in the noise? And that's the not for long piece. So yeah.
I like that. And what's next for you guys? We're in 2026 now.
Yeah.
Year 2 for you.
Yes, year 2 for me.
And you're in New York. You live
Based in
here.
New York,
And you're working in translation in New York.
Yeah.
What's next for you here?
So, I mean, what we're trying to do is a number of things. We're very excited about what we're doing actually in Dubai. So that's a big focus for us. We're working with Google Gemini. We're helping to launch Gemini across the Middle East. And so that's a project that we've been super excited about. And again, if you look at that part of the world, they recognize that culture is going to be the kind of thing that determines them once all the petrodollars run out. And so there's a ton of opportunities that's happening out there. I'm quite excited about that. And then here, I guess closer to home, one of the things that we're trying to build out is this idea of this kind of, can you map the flow of culture? So what we're doing is plugging into United Masters data, that kind of first party data, to see if we can map those cultural flows to build essentially a predictive engine, which will give you at least an indication of where things are going to happen and using music as a proxy. So you think about that kind of artist insight that you get when you upload your information onto Spotify. It gives you a sense of who's consuming your content and where is that happening. We're doing some work to map out those flows of culture in terms of music. Where is it being created and where is it being consumed, and seeing what that gives us as an indicator. So for us, again, it's a strategic project. It's not necessarily a creative output, but for me, it's about improving the quality of the strategic insight, which then directly leads to improving the quality of the creative.
Oh, for sure.
And so that's something else I'm excited about. We've got some great plans that we're doing we work with McDonald's.
Yeah, you guys were named AOR for them.
Correct.
Yes.
So that relationship is growing. It's phenomenal. They're great partners to be working with. We're working with AT&T. Again, some incredible work. They're celebrating their 150th anniversary next year. And so we're doing a lot of work in terms of thinking about what that means and how you connect that to different cultures in the United States. That work is going to be phenomenal as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we're feeling good about.
Yeah, you guys got some heavy hitter clients.
Yeah, and again, we've been fortunate enough to work with the NBA for a number of years and build up that franchise to what it is today. And just recently, the Clios awarded it the Sports Franchise of the Year. Nice, which was a great recognition of some of the work that we've been doing in partnership with them. And so it's been a long journey, but that one has been when they renegotiated their media rights for $76 billion over 11 years. feels like did a good job in terms of showing what the value of that franchise is and doing some incredible storytelling with them.
Absolutely. I've been loving some of those spots from this past year as well. Incredible. Now, as we look towards the end of this show, advice. What have you learned that you can tell? I think you told me before we started recording, you have a 24-year-old child. What would you say to your child if your child wanted to go into advertising, knowing everything you know today? Speak to me like you would speak to your child about entering this industry. How do I stay in it for the long term? Where should I go work? Should I go work in media? Should I work at a creative agency? Should I be my own creator? Should I create music? How can I get into this creative communications world? What's your advice?
Great questions. So if you want to get into the advertising industry itself, I heard some advice from a CEO back in the UK, which I thought was pretty good, which is read the trades. And his point was read the trades and look at who's just won. Because as you'll know, when an agency wins a big pitch, they do not have the team.
No.
Right? You sell, but they will not have that complete team. So the advice was read the trades, look at who's just won something, and then show up with your CV and say, I'm willing to do anything. Mm-hmm. And that is just timing. So again, it's like the Steve conversation. It's just one of those, create opportunities for yourself to be lucky, to get lucky. So you don't do that by sitting at home. You don't do that necessarily by just not talking to people, but just read the trades.
But what if the trades are too long and there's so many articles out there? Is there any sort of outlet that has 60 seconds of just what you need?
Follow, breaking, and entering. Oh my God. You don't have to.
That's why we do what we do, though. Like the new business wins. That's why we go crazy when, and I'll just say, like RGA wins digital transformation for Levi's.
Yes.
Like, great.
Exactly.
Like, that's how you know. Like, we'll say that every single morning, some new sort of win. Yeah. So if I'm going to get a job, you go and hit them up.
Follow, breaking and entering, and then you'll know what's happening. Exactly. Very good. I love that. that.
And work with Translation, the best agency out there.
You know what? I love this reciprocity. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's
smart.
That's genuinely just plug into what's going on. Be at the right place, right time. Right. So that's one thing. In terms of your broader question about whether you should get into the industry first or whether it's not a bad thing to get experiences outside. I didn't get into the advertising industry proper until I was late 20s, early 30s.
Oh, that's nice.
Right. And I gained experience outside of the industry.
What were those jobs again?
So I started off I set up my own design company. So I trained as an illustrator, as a designer. So I started off as a design company, but then I set up a record label back in the day. I was working with young people in terms of just getting young people who were at risk of criminal behavior. So I was working with a non-profit organization and helping them to get jobs and kind of get industry, get into various industries and teaching them tech and all this kind of stuff. So I did a number of different things before I got into the industry proper. And by the time I got into it, I was just shocked at how kind of monochrome it was and how it was a real, because I didn't have the social capital. You talk about this idea of social capital. Who do you know? What are the networks? I didn't have any of those networks. I'm just a kid growing up in South London, not connected to this industry, but looking at it from the outside and having a fascination with how does this stuff get made and who are the people that are in there? I was lucky enough actually I had a friend who, have you heard of Creative Review? So in the UK, there's a publication called Creative Review.
Yeah.
It's been going for a number of years. And a friend of mine got a job in their subscriptions department. And so he was like, hey, John, you're into kind of creativity and stuff. Do you want me to send you a copy to you? So I was like, sure. So I wasn't paying for it because I couldn't afford it. But for 3 years, he got found out and he got sacked. But, they kept sending these magazines to me for 3 years. So I was reading all this stuff about, and that's what I'm hearing about, Saatchi and Saatchi and BBH and all this stuff. And I'm just this kid just reading this stuff. But I didn't know anybody in this industry. I didn't know anyone at all. And so I was very much on the outside of it because particularly in London, it is a bit of an old boys club, or it certainly was a bit of an old boys club. If you didn't know the right people, you didn't go to the right schools, didn't have that kind of education, it was very hard to break into the industry. And so my thing is learn some experience outside. If it's not a bad thing to get some experiences outside, because when I got into it, the perspective that I was able to bring, having lived in places and been in spaces and worked with real at the cutting edge of culture. Again,
You're doing all the things.
doing all the things, and
Yeah.
then you bring that into the industry, and you can talk with authority because you're not just talking about something you don't know or something you've researched. It's like, no, I know this.
You lived it.
I've lived it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Is there any sort of vertical within an agency structure that you're really bullish on that you think is a good place to enter today?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously things are changing so much now, and everybody talks about AI and the adoption of what that's meaning in terms of production budgets and all those sorts of things. And we're leaning heavily into AI. We're one of those people that we think you've got to and again, working with Google Gemini, the stuff that you're able to do, the kind of tool that it gives you. So my thing would be to lean into the changes that are happening. It's very easy to we have this phrase at Translation, which is run towards the darkness. The quickest way through a storm is often to go straight through it. So run towards the things that you may be uncomfortable about. Run towards the darkness means that sometimes if you're looking for comfort, you're looking for security, this is maybe not the best industry for you. If you're willing to challenge yourself, make yourself uncomfortable, be courageous. And courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing something even when you're scared. And so doing those, so many of these, when I track back up along my career, not just this conversation with Steve, because you could go, oh, it's very nice of you to be able to go to the masters. Not everybody can do that, which is true. But if I look back at the certain points in my career, it was places where I made myself uncomfortable. I stepped out, I went into a different environment, I met someone. That conversation led to something else. So every point in my career was me making myself, stepping out of my comfort zone and stepping into something else and just being open to seeing what the universe has to offer. So I think that would be the principle.
I love that. Love that. How can people learn more about you if clients want to work with you, or if people want to work for you? What's the best way?
So because I'm old, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Cool.
Because that's where the old people are. Well, actually, you guys are doing some good content
all
on there
over
as
that.
well. Yeah, I see great content there. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Obviously, Translation. You can find us there. If you're interested, you're an artist and you want to find out about United Masters, just look up United Masters because it's a very easy platform for you to join. And yeah, we'd love to hear from the new wave of talent.
Well done. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Crushed it.